Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to class. Today we are going to talk about language in contact. What happens when speakers of many languages stay together, live together? This is number one. Number two, what happens when speakers have two or three or more languages in their verbal repertoire to interact with other members of the society? Situation 3, what happens when multiple languages are spoken in the same society? Look at the case of India. India is a multilingual society and we have multilingual discourses. India has survived centuries with this multilingual fabric, and all the languages here negotiate with each other, they are in contact with each other, they influence each other, the change goes in both directions, and we see a lot of convergence, linguistic convergence, specifically in southern region of the country. And linguistic convergence refers to the situation where two languages merge, two languages in close contact for a longer period of time. Another variety emerges, which is not essentially third variety, but a variety which contains properties of both the languages, and both the languages change each other, and one Dakhini Hindi, Urdu for that matter, is one example of convergence, and we find many in southern states. So today we are going to talk about language in contact as a phenomenon and multilingual societies and multilingual discourse, its dynamics, and the circumstances and contexts in which they are used, our linguistic attitude, how we look at it, the linguistic ideologies. So lots of things in this context. So we are going to talk about multilingual societies and multilingual discourse today. The content for this discussion has broadly been extrapolated from the Wadra and Fuller book 2015, An Introduction to Sociolinguistics, 7th edition. So the construct of this discussion owes it to that work and publication. I just wanted to mention it in the beginning. Multilingual is a norm in societies across the world. So this is not India alone, entire African continent, right? Part of European continent. And the perception that monolingualism is a norm is misnomer. And I'll come to this point why we consider monolingualism or a single language, one language, one society, one language, one nation. It's a European idea. It doesn't fit into South Asian region. And India presents a classic case of multilingualism and a multilingual society, where people who speak different languages have been together, sharing and thriving in a multilingual setting. There are political boundaries, of course, because one state and the other state, there are political boundaries. There are social boundaries, but language cuts across all such political, social, religious boundaries. And the languages apparently may be seen divided, but actually there is a continuum. So these boundaries don't work at all in terms of language. So Telugu is not restricted only to Andhra or Telangana, and Tamil is not restricted only to Tamil Nadu. Tamil is present in North as well. Lots of Tamil speakers have settled in North India. So, the state boundaries, these geographical boundaries, class boundaries, region boundaries, religion boundaries. I mean, Tamil Muslims speak Tamil the way Tamil Hindus speak. Tamil is Tamil, right? You find a little deviation when we take a political position in North, where we see Hindi and Urdu as two separate different languages that is marked by a religious boundary. But if you look at the actually used, it's difficult to find out what language one is speaking. Is it Hindi or is it Urdu? So the position on Hindi or Urdu may be political, may be religious, but linguistically speaking, they are the same, and Gandhi termed it as Hindustani. But one thing is for sure, that in such societies, many languages remain in contact for a very long period of time and giving uh, a new variety with convergence. The bilingualism or multilingualism phenomena in India is complementary in nature. So it doesn't disrupt. In fact, it enriches the repertoire of the speaker. And these languages do not stand in opposition to each other, but we find a mutual intelligibility, sharing, and continuation. So we find languages in continuum in this country. It's a pluricultural nation where ethnicity, culture, language, and religion are so varied and diverse. And India represents a very high degree of multilingualism. My own case, so as a native speaker of Bhojpuri, then I learned Hindi as another language in the school, on the street. Hindi heavily loaded with Bhojpuri accent and words mixed with words, English in my higher education, and I understand Bangla. For that, I cannot speak very fluently, but I do understand Bangla very well, and Punjabi very well, and some other languages I understand. So communication may not break down if I talk to a Punjabi speaker. Communication will not break down if I talk to a Gujarati speaker. Though I not speak Gujarati, though I not speak Punjabi, what I'm saying is that the differentiation, the difference in our codes that we are using does not necessarily restrict the communication. So a level of intelligibility is there, and that's the beauty of this diverse multilingual society. An individual uses a particular language, and take your own case, for example, if your mother tongue is not the dominant language of your locality, for example, you are staying in Tamil Nadu, and if Tamil is not your mother tongue, you may be speaking some other language at home, then your case is a classic case of multilingualism. You are native speaker or speaker of that particular language X at home. You learn Tamil, which is the dominant regional language and official language of the state you live in. You learn Tamil, you acquire Tamil as native speaker. So you have two languages. You are a compound bilingual, and then you go to Hindi medium or English medium school. So you learn English, and if you move out of Tamil Nadu and let's say you settle in North, Hindi becomes your first choice. So look at your own case, and this is the case of millions of Indians, right? And go to any part of the country, this is a case, but that we are by design, we are multilingual. And what do we call language boundaries? That I know Tamil, I know English, I know Hindi, I know Telugu. They are not strict boundaries. They are porous and overlapping. So this is the typical case of India in terms of multilingual society. Now, Do we mean to say that we are equally competent in all the languages that we know, understand, and speak? Our competencies in different languages may vary. So, we'll talk about competencies and convergence. And I will quote S.N. Shridhar as quoted in Wardrow and Fuller's book. And he says, multilingualism involving balanced native like command of all languages in the repertoire is rather uncommon. And this is normal. Typically, multilinguals have varying degree of command of the different repertoires. The differences in competence in various languages might range from command of a few lexical items, formulaic expressions such as greetings and rudimentary conversational skills, all the way to excellent command of grammar and vocabulary and a specialized register and styles. So, when we say multilingual or bilingual, we don't essentially refer to the equal level of competency in all languages. Your competency in one language may vary depending on the mode and the circumstances, context in which you acquired them. If your acquisition of language happens early in early childhood, you will be very proficient speaker of that language. At the same time, the need, it is need driven, it is context driven. Timing is very important. When did you acquire that language? Right? If it is early bilingualism or multilingualism, you have high level of competency like native speakers in other languages. But if your acquisition is delayed, if your learning of the second, third, fourth language is delayed, you have restricted competencies in that language. And it can vary from, just a few words which enable you to communicate, formulaic expressions like, the typical expressions, for example, bargaining in the market, buying vegetable in the market, hiring a taxi, talking to a banker. So, these are formulaic expressions and you can converse. From there to your competency like native speaker, where you have different registers and styles in your command. So, this competency varies, and not necessarily if you know 5 languages, 4 languages, you have equal competency in all 4, right? So, we have to keep this in mind. In multilingual context, the level of competence in a code or a language is developed based on the need of the speaker to use language in a particular domain or for a particular activity. And you can check, you can test this phenomena on your own. That if you have started with a home language in a particular area, let's take this example of Tamil speaking community. So, if your mother tongue is not Tamil and you are staying in Chennai, you are born in Chennai, you are raised in Chennai, the capital of Tamil Nadu, you will be very proficient in your home language. And when you step out, you acquire Tamil and you become a compound bilingual. Later on, you go to English medium school, you learn English. And if you travel frequently to north or go for job in north, you also pick up Hindi. But the time of learning and picking up a particular language is different, and your competencies will be different. At the same time, because home language is restricted in a particular domain, very personal domain, and if you happen not to use it so frequently, maybe possible that you will develop excellent competency in Tamil, you will develop excellent competency in English, and your learning of and use of mother tongue will be restricted to a particular domain. So, this will vary depending on the need and the way you acquired it, the way you learned it. They also recognize the context does not determine language choice, but merely influences it. The speakers draw on social norms and meanings that are shared in a community but not controlled by them. What is the factor behind choosing a particular language out of your multilingual verbal repertoire? Right? There are multiple factors. it is the context, it may be the topic. For example, you will be very comfortable in talking about a particular technical topic in a public meeting in English, even if you are a Tamil speaker. Your education and training enables you feel comfortable in talking about something in English formally, right? So the choice depends on the context, the choice depends on the need, the choice depends on the communication partner, and such factors also play a major role in choosing a particular code or a particular language to be used in a particular socio-cultural situation, context. And in such situations, when speakers master multiple languages and use them in all conversations, there may be linguistic consequences. And what are these consequences? It develops a contact language, right? Uh, the consequence is diffusion of certain features from one language. If you are using frequently two or three different languages, and if you are in a multilingual context with other speakers who are also multilingual, there is a minimal negotiated version emerges. So these languages converge and give, you know, uh, a minimally negotiated version which is acceptable to all the speakers and becomes a norm, linguistic norm. We call it contact language. Gumpage and Wilson, way back in 1971, conducted a survey in India, conducted a study in India, and this is what they report. I borrow from Wadrow and Fuller, as it has been quoted. So Gumpage and Wilson, 1971, reported that in Kupwar, a village of about 3,000 inhabitants in Maharashtra, India, there was convergence among the 4 languages spoken. So in the small village with 3,000 inhabitants, 4 languages, existed. Marathi and Urdu, both are Indo-European languages. Kannada, a Dravidian language. Telugu, also a Dravidian language, right? And spoken by only a few people in the village. The languages were distributed mainly by caste, and the highest caste, the Jains, spoke Kannada, and the lowest caste, the untouchables, spoke Marathi. People in different castes also needed to speak to one another and to Telugu speaking rope makers. The Urdu speaking Muslims also needed to be filled in. Bilingualism or even trilingualism was normal, particularly among the men, but it was Marathi which dominated intergroup communication. I unquote. This is from Gumpage and Wilson's study. And this is just one study by the American anthropologist and linguist, but you on your own can find such a situation where in a locality you will find 2-3 dominant languages present. And because of globalization, mobility, and technological advancements, such caste hierarchy and boundaries are blurred. We are mixing frequently, but you do find a negotiated variety which becomes lingua franca of these multilingual speakers, and different classes, different social strata speaks a different language, and then there is a consensus on a contact language or a particular negotiated language which becomes lingua franca of the community. But this is a very quite a common phenomena across entire country. So wherever you go, you find such. I have experiences in Northeast, for example, in Shillong, maybe in Arunachal, Itanagar. Go to, let's say, Imphal or Assam, where 3 languages converge, 3 language families basically. Assam shares borders with all other Tibeto-Burman speaking states. Assamese is an Indo-Aryan language, and you find a lot of laborers and cultivators in tea gardens who are essentially Austroasiatic Mundai speakers. And you find such convergence and contact in those areas, right? There is a variety called Bagania for that matter, and Bagania refers to Bagan. Bagan means tea garden they're talking about. There is a variety, which is the result of convergence and contact of Indo-Aryan, Assamese, partly Bodo, and Munda languages. So, such a situation gives birth to convergence in syntax, but vocabulary is something that differentiates and maintains the distinction. And the kind of variety of multilingualism that you find, like in this village reported by Gampaj and Wilson, this is a response to local needs to communicate and share. And such dynamic situation exists all over the country. Moving on, we come to language ideologies and multilingualism. It's important to see how non-multilingual speakers look at multilingualism. And I'm referring to Western societies, how they look at multilingualism. The majority of the societies are isoglossic in nature. So they find isogloss, monoglossic in that way, single language, right? So majority of the Western societies assign prestige value to classical languages like Greek, Latin, and others, and they subscribe to a dominant popular elite variety of the language, like in French in France, English in England, Spanish in Spain, right? So they look at multilingual societies as a deficient. They don't consider it in a very positive way. And as opposed to these monolingual societies, multilingual societies look at this phenomena as restricting, right? And this is vice versa, opposite. The monolingual societies look at multilingual societies as deficient, right? Multilingualism in such societies often associated with immigrant status. Like if you look at the European history, if you look at the American history, many immigrants have arrived and settled in those states, those countries, and they have their own mother tongue, like Arabic, for example, or these African slaves in American society, right? Europeans in American society, Spanish speakers, for example, Italian speakers, for example, right? So the status, and because these migrants migrate to these places and they occupy low jobs on the value chain. So the attitude towards the speaker is reflected and projected to attitude towards the language they speak. So they look at it as inferior because they took low jobs on the value chain, right? And that's why the attitude towards the people of this class, immigrant class, is also projected on to the language they speak. So that's the problem with these countries, right? So multilingualism in such societies is often associated with immigrant status and thus with group who tend to occupy rather low position in society. Multilingualism becomes associated with inferiority. Much of the research on discourse in multilingual context use the term code switching and code mixing. Now, code switching and code mixing, it is still recently was used as a theoretical framework to understand such mixing and switchings, but now we use it now we call it multilingual discourse. We don't essentially indicate mixing and switching in terms of isolated codes. Now, another emerging uh, idea and framework is linguistic landscape. And what is that? The physical presence of multiple languages in public sphere, in public display, in terms of signboard, billboards, posters, pamphlets, graffiti. So, if you look at a public place of a multilingual society, you will find many languages, even if they are using the same script. Possibly, I may be using Roman script for my Hindi billboard, but you find presence of multiple languages, and it has emerged as a subfield in social linguistics, linguistic landscape. A recently emerged area of study in social linguistics of multilingual societies is linguistic landscape, the display of languages in public spaces, including signs, billboards, and advertisements and graffiti. A linguistic landscape is not a straightforward reflection of the official status of languages used, the linguistic diversity present in the city, nor the relationship between languages. So, there are other political factors they also factor in. It reflects how languages appear in public space, provides evidence about underlying ideologies concerning particular codes and their speakers. Right? The way in which languages are used both reflect the impact of their perceived values. So, not necessarily if you have two, three languages present, they reflect the actual linguistic situation. There are political, ideological, and judgmental values attached to it. For example, in India, when Kothari Commission, uh, you know, suggested three language formula, that seemed to be a negotiated harmonious position taken by government of India. And you see, if you travel in Indian train and go to any station in any part of the country, you will essentially find at least a trilingual signboard on railway stations, on bus stations, bus depots, on government buildings. One is the local language, be it Tamil, be it Gujarati, be it Punjabi. One is Hindi and one is English. So you find these trilingual signages and boards all over. But it is interesting to notice that you find a lot of English signboards, English only signboards in the bazaar, streets, and other shops. Even if there are some signboards with Tamil, there are some signboards with Gujarati, there are some signboards with Punjabi in that particular area. But English dominates the linguistic scape of our public place. And that shows the aspirations of the speakers and users of English in India. So, this is what it means that it reflects how language appear in public space. It provides evidence about underlying ideologies concerning particular code and their speakers. Look at some examples. I just shot it from my own camera. If you go from Guwahati to Shillong by road, there is on the highway you find a, a food outlet, a small resort kind of thing, a small which has a small restaurant, and I happen to see the creative imagination of the user put in terms of a signboard that also encodes the cultural ethos and our beliefs, and a kind of anecdote about women. Look at this: washrooms, he to the left. So it is indicating a male toilet towards the left and she to the right. But look at the subtle interplay of the sentence. He to the left because she is always right. Interesting. Look at a board on Guwahati airport. It says Hastakshar, a Hindi word written in Roman script, except for one letter, Ksha, Hasta, and Ksha, Hindi, Devanagari, and then AR, Hastakshar, right? Look at yet another examples. This is what is shot in Chennai, Shauchalay, Mard, toilet, gents. सरकारी ठंडी बियर की दुकान, and look at the spelling. It's child beer, chilled beer, right? It captures our popular imaginations. English, it's so important and dominant. Look at the locality and the background. You understand nobody speaks English there. It's exclusively for Hindi speakers. But look at the board. Just one line that has to be there to announce the global connectivity of the speaker and user. So a Hindi signboard followed by an English one, despite errors and problems. Look at system admin room. This is very quite a common. Delhi Sadar Bazaar. Look at 4 languages there: Hindi, English, Punjabi, and Urdu. And look at Chennai Central: Telugu, Hindi, and English. So this is, look at any bazaar. Look at any bazaar. I happen to find these pictures on Google, but you can find it in real terms when you go to market and just have a look around. Spend some time and look around. Look at the one bazaar scene in the picture on left, right? It's not a very cosmopolitan city. It's a normal, typical middle class Indian city, and you find Apna Hotel, veg and non-veg, and a lot of other signboards exclusively in English, and it's difficult to find Hindi or Tamil or Telugu or Punjabi or other languages or signboards here. The display or the presence of English in Indian landscape in the public space speaks about the significance of English in the country. Even on a roadside vendor prefers to use English and Hindi or a local language. Dragon Momo corner. Look at the background scene and the frame, the kind of clientele he has. Majority of them do not speak English. So this is the ideology and preference that we were talking about. Then language attitudes in multilingual settings, right? As I told you, usually multiple use of languages is seen as inferior and stigmatized. There is something called deficit hypothesis. We have already talked about it in one of our videos of bilingualism and code mixing. But multilingualism should be seen as an enriching phenomena where the speaker has multiple repertoire to refer to, multiple linguistic resources to refer to. Many people have a monoglossic ideology. They believe that languages should be kept strictly separate, and you might have seen such Puritan attitude where everyone wants to use pure language in quotes, pure language. As a linguist, as a social linguist, we need to understand that there is nothing called pure language. Nothing is pure. Language by nature is multilingual. If I ask Hindi speakers, achar, pickles, or kanchi, scissors, aspatal, Are they Hindi words? Are they pure words? Or you can take any example in your own mother tongue. A number of words are from different languages, which over a period of time you have, borrowed and assimilated, adopted. File, for example, in Hindi, right? Road, for example, in Hindi. How many of us say sadak? Highway, for example, in Hindi. So these are all English words, but we have adopted them and cultured them and customized them in such a way that now we have started using grammatical features, morphological features with these words. Phylon, right? फाइलों में फाइलों को टेबल पे रख दो. Keep all the files on the table. टेबलों पर, case marking. English word with Hindi case marking. And this is a very normal phenomenon. So, but people have this isoglossic, monoglossic ideology. And such dismissal, where they believe that language should be strictly kept apart and pure language should be used, is misunderstood and misnomer. There is nothing of this such kind that exists. We aspire, but in reality, nobody speaks any language which is pure. There is nothing called pure language at all. It doesn't exist. And nobody speaks a language, by the way. We all speak a variety. We all speak a dialect. Which Telugu you consider to be the real Telugu for that matter? Go around Andhra and Tamil and Telangana, you find variations. Which Telugu is the real Telugu? So the socio-politically elite class becomes the benchmark. And that Telugu is considered standard Telugu. That is Telugu, that Telugu is used in media, that Telugu is used in textbooks. That becomes standard. But mind you, that is one of the varieties of Telugu. It has got social support, it has got institutional support, and it has got supremacy over the rest of the varieties. But none of us speak any pure language. So this monoglossic attitude towards language is seriously problematic, and it doesn't work. It doesn't exist, it doesn't work, it is artificially created. Language by nature is multilingual. What we have speakers with a sophisticated knowledge of both languages who are also acutely aware of community norms. What does it mean? It means that, if I am speaking 3, 4, 5 languages, I do know where to speak what, where to choose which language. So my choice of language is not determined arbitrarily, randomly by me, but my choice of variety that I'm going to use in a particular conversation situation, communication situation, will depend on the multiple factors, like my identity, like the context, like the topic, right? Also depends on the partner. Who is your communication partner? With whom are you speaking, right? So it's a very dynamic phenomena, and this understanding that language is naturally a multilingual entity, and there is nothing called pure language, and we have to get away from this monoglossic ideology and respect the speakers and the users who have, and in fact, in multilingual societies, it is celebrated, unlike Western societies who are monoglossic in nature, right? Ferguson 1959 underlined a sociolinguistic situation where two varieties of the same language or two other varieties coexist together, right? And this is a stable sociolinguistic situation, a stable linguistic situation. So people are socially bilingual, at least socially bilingual, where they use one language in all formal situations, in media, in governance, in administration, in education, in publication, and the other variety in all informal settings. So the same speakers in the same speech community have two different codes or two different languages for two different sets of purposes. That is, this phenomenon is called diglossia, and he talked about high variety and low variety, H variety, superimposed variety, and L variety, which is a commoners variety used for common informal settings. To know more about diglossia, you can watch the video on diglossia and you can know more about it. It was a social linguistic phenomenon proposed by Charles Ferguson in 1959. And then identity also plays a very significant role in multilingual discourse, right? And in most multilingual settings, there are no strict or explicit guidelines for what language to speak. People must select a particular code whenever they choose to speak, and they may also decide to switch from one code to another or mix codes even within sometimes very short utterances. In social linguistics, it refers to code switching, and we call it multilingual discourse now. So people have tendencies to switch from one language to other, and this switching is done because of multiple social linguistic factors. We have already discussed it in the class, and if you want to know more about it, watch the video on code switching and code mixing, and also language hybridity, right? Moving on, there are theoretical models, right, to predict the choice of language, right? And it address underlying principles, often unconscious, that guides speakers to make a choice of which language to speak when. One by Mayers and Scotton, 1983, 93, 1998, model is called markedness model, right? Uh, what does it mean? For a given interaction, there is an unmarked choice, a natural choice. Unmarked means natural, spontaneous. That is called unmarked, for which you don't have to choose, make a choice. It's unmarked and spontaneous and natural. But sometimes it is marked when you deliberately choose a different language and a code to speak. For example, suppose I meet you and I want to keep other people, listening to what we are talking. I choose English. Imagine, assuming the fact that others are not party to our conversation. Sometimes you want to exclude others. Sometimes other identity, needs, for that matter. If I want to sound intellectual and serious, and unfortunately in Indian context, we use English. Just to show that you are educated, you have mixing with English words in Tamil, in Punjabi, in any other language. There are multiple social linguistic factors which make it marked, and we choose a separate language deliberately. So, markedness model produced by Mayer and Scotton in 1983, it says for a given interaction there is an unmarked choice, that is a code which is expected in the specific context. The relative markedness of a code varies by situation. So, it's all because of other socio-political factors and the communication partners who are communicating the topic. What are you communicating on? What are you talking on? And the topic, the situation, the setting, the partner, your identity issue. Multiple factors, play a role. Then there is another approach to understand this, situation is social constructivist approach, which says that identities are not seen as fixed but fluid. We all have multiple identities, multiple and culturally constructed. Identity might align with pre-existent categories such as gender, occupation, ethnicity, and so on. These are all social determinants to mark our identity, but should be thought of as being brought into being through the interaction with others. So it's not purely, this choice is not purely linguistic. but there are other social factors. There are other social linguistic factors which play a role, like social determinants like gender, social determinants like, like male to male talk and male female talk will differ. Degree of formality will differ with depending on the communication partner, right? Look at this Martha Vineyard Island study by William Libov. The population from age group 31 to 45 considered them to be custodian of laws and culture of the island, and they typically and deliberately tried to sound different by raising the central vowels. So there are multiple complex factors which play a role in selection of a particular variety, tone, accent, and a code, right? But one thing is for sure, that it definitely talks about the ability and the efficacy of the user or the speaker to have this rich linguistic resource to choose from. So the monoglossic attitude is misnomer, is misunderstood and problematic. Language by nature is multilingual, and we as multilingual speaker. Multilingualism is a norm and it is not an exception. With these ideas we end here, and we'll continue our discussion on some other aspects of multilingualism and multilingual discourse in our next videos. This is it for now. Thank you.